Welcome to Heartbreak Chronicles. The autumn sunset streamed through the restaurant's blinds onto the wooden dining table, coating the entire room in a warm golden glow. Kieran plated the freshly made pasta into two white ceramic dishes, skillfully sprinkling Parmesan cheese on top. This had been their habit for 8 years of marriage. Every Wednesday dinner, he would cook while she selected the wine. "Celeste, dinner is ready." He called upstairs, his voice echoing through the empty house. As an electrical engineer, Kieran was accustomed to precision and order. His life was as methodical as the circuit diagrams he designed. Wake up at 7, leave for work at 8, return home at 6. And Celeste, his beautiful wife, was a marketing director, always full of energy and creativity. At least, that's what he used to think. Celeste descended the stairs wearing a deep blue dress, her blonde hair swaying gently on her shoulders. Kieran noticed she had changed her perfume again today, an unfamiliar floral scent, richer and more alluring than her usual choice. He also noticed her nails were newly done with a French manicure, which was unusual for a weekday. "Sorry to keep you waiting," she said, sitting down at the dining table, but her attention was clearly not on the dinner before her. Her phone lay at the edge of the table, screen down, but it vibrated every few minutes. Each time the phone buzzed, Celeste's eyes would unconsciously glance in that direction, then force herself to look elsewhere. Kieran began noticing these details with the same acuity he used to troubleshoot circuits at work. Over the past few months, Celeste had changed. At first, the changes were subtle. She began working overtime more frequently, had client meetings on weekends. Her wardrobe became more refined. Even her lingerie had changed. He had once found some lace underwear he'd never seen before in the laundry basket. Tags still on, obviously expensive new styles. "How was work today?" Kieran asked, twirling his fork around the noodles. "Oh, very busy," Celeste replied somewhat absent-mindedly, her fingers unconsciously playing with her necklace, a habit when she was nervous. "Harrison's project needs the entire strategy revised. I might have to work late for a few more days." Her phone vibrated again, and this time Celeste almost immediately reached for it. Kieran saw that flash of light in her eyes when she looked at the screen, a kind of light he hadn't seen in her eyes when looking at him for a long time. The corners of her mouth turned up slightly, forming an almost imperceptible smile, but that expression was so familiar. It was her expression when she was in love. "Something important?" He tried to make his voice sound casual. "Just work stuff," Celeste quickly replied to a message, then flipped her phone over and placed it on her lap. "You know how it is, clients always have strange ideas at strange times." But Kieran noticed her hands were trembling slightly, another habitual gesture when she was lying. 8 years of marriage, he knew her too well. He also noticed she was wearing heavier makeup than usual today, with a new shade of lipstick and more elaborate eyeshadow than normal. "How's the new project manager?" Kieran asked casually. "The one you mentioned who transferred from New York, Tristan." Celeste's fork paused on her plate, a very brief pause, but Kieran caught it. "Tristan? Oh, he's very professional. Very capable at work." Her voice sounded somewhat tense, not as natural as usual. Kieran decided to continue probing. "Sounds like you work well together. How old is he?" "I'm not entirely sure. Maybe 32, 33, Celeste answered, but she avoided Kieran's gaze. "He worked at a big company in New York before, has experience with many international projects." Just then, her phone rang again, this time with a message notification sound. Celeste quickly glanced at it, then almost instinctively began typing a reply. But in that moment when she was focused on the screen, Kieran clearly saw the message content. Those few words hit his nerves like an electric shock. "Can't wait to be with you again. Meet tonight, Tristan." Time seemed to stand still. Kieran felt his world undergo an earthquake-like change in that instant, but he forced himself to remain calm. He continued twirling his fork, putting the pasta in his mouth, though now the food tasted like paper. Celeste was quickly replying to the message, a flush appearing on her face that Kieran hadn't seen in a long time. She looked younger, excited, full of vitality. Her fingers flew across the screen, obviously replying to a long message. "Celeste," Kieran said softly, his voice sounding unusually calm. "I think we need to talk." Just then, Kieran made what seemed like an inadvertent movement. He reached for the pepper shaker in the center of the table, accidentally bumping the table. The table shook slightly, and Celeste's wine glass tilted, a few drops of red wine splashing onto her phone screen. "Oh, sorry." Kieran quickly apologized while handing her a napkin. But Celeste's reaction was much more intense than expected. She jumped up abruptly, trying to catch her phone that was sliding toward the table's edge, and in the process, the pasta in her mouth made her cough violently. She began choking, her face turning red, tears streaming from the corners of her eyes. Noodles fell from her mouth, and wine splashed onto her new dress. "Are you okay?" Kieran stood up and gently patted her back, asking with apparent concern, but feeling a complex satisfaction inside. Her overreaction only further confirmed the significance of the message he had just seen. When Celeste finally stopped coughing and regained her breathing, she quickly grabbed her phone and wiped the screen with a napkin. Her hands were still trembling, not just from the recent choking. A flash of panic crossed her eyes, like a child caught stealing. "I need to go to the bathroom to clean up," she said hurriedly, then quickly left the dining room, phone clutched tightly in her hand. Kieran sat back in his chair, staring at the half plate of pasta she had left behind. Tristan. This name echoed repeatedly in his mind. He remembered the new colleague Celeste had mentioned recently, a young and promising marketing director transferred from New York. She had once praised his creative thinking and professional ability. Now Kieran understood she had praised much more than that. During the time Celeste was upstairs, Kieran began recalling various details from the past few months. Her work hours had become irregular, often claiming she had to attend client dinners or project meetings. She had begun paying more attention to her appearance, buying new clothes with noticeably increased frequency. Most importantly, she had become distant from him, and their intimate relationship had almost completely stopped. When Celeste reappeared, she had already fixed her makeup, but her eyes were evasive, unable to meet Kieran's gaze directly. "Feeling better?" Kieran asked. "Yes, thank you." She sat back in her chair, but was obviously restless. "I think I might have eaten too quickly." "Maybe because you were too hungry," Kieran said. "Your mealtimes at work have been very irregular lately." Celeste nodded but didn't respond. Her phone was on her lap, and she would sneak glances at it every few minutes. Over the next few days, Kieran began his investigation. As an engineer, he was accustomed to solving problems systematically. He needed evidence, needed facts, not just suspicion. He began noticing Celeste's behavioral patterns. She was indeed working overtime, but not at the office. By examining their joint credit card statements, Kieran discovered a series of suspicious consumption records. Dinners at upscale restaurants in places she had never mentioned, hotel bar charges, always on weekday evenings, even purchases from a lingerie store totaling $300, but he had never seen her wear those newly bought undergarments. Kieran also noticed her phone usage habits had changed. Before, she would casually leave her phone on the table or sofa, but now she always kept it with her, even when going to the bathroom. She had also changed her phone password for the first time in 8 years. One Thursday evening, Celeste said she had to work late again. Kieran decided to verify this personally. He drove to her office building and found the parking lot was almost empty, with only a few offices in the building still lit, but Celeste's office was dark. He waited in the car for 2 hours, but Celeste never appeared. At 10 o'clock, he drove home, but took a detour past several upscale restaurants in the city center. Outside the third restaurant, he saw Celeste's car. Kieran parked his car across the street, from where he could clearly see the restaurant's floor-to-ceiling windows. Through the glass, he saw Celeste sitting at a table by the window, with a man he didn't recognize sitting across from her. The man was younger than Kieran, with an athletic build and carefully styled hair. They were sitting close together, the man's hand covering Celeste's, and she was smiling at him. Such a brilliant, relaxed smile that Kieran hadn't seen her smile like that in a long time. Kieran took out his phone and began taking photos. He needed evidence. After observing for an hour, they came out of the restaurant. Kieran watched how the man helped Celeste put on her coat, how they embraced, how Celeste stood on tiptoe to kiss his cheek. These gestures were too intimate, far beyond the scope of colleagues or friends. That night, when Celeste returned home, it was nearly midnight. She said she had gone out to eat with some female colleagues and had talked about work topics for a long time. But Kieran smelled the faint scent of masculine cologne on her, definitely not something that would be present at a gathering of female colleagues. "Did you have a good time?" Kieran asked, his voice sounding terrifyingly calm. "Yes, It's been a long time since I've had a gathering with the girls, Celeste replied, but there was a nervous tremor in her voice. You know, we need to relax occasionally. Of course, Kieran nodded. Everyone needs to relax. By the way, which restaurant did you go to? Celeste froze for a moment, obviously not prepared for this question. Oh, just that new Italian restaurant downtown. Bella Vista? Kieran asked tentatively. Yes, that's the one. Celeste quickly replied, but Kieran noticed her expression of relief. But Kieran knew she was lying. Bella Vista wasn't a new restaurant. It had been operating for 3 years. And if she really went with female colleagues, why would she be relieved? The next day, Kieran took half a day off and decided to conduct a deeper investigation. He first went to Celeste's company, using bringing lunch as an excuse. The receptionist told him Celeste was in a meeting, but through the office's glass wall, Kieran saw her office. She was indeed in a meeting, but with only 2 people, Celeste and a young man. They were sitting very close, the man occasionally touching Celeste's arm, and she obviously enjoyed this contact. Kieran sat down in a coffee shop across from the building, from where he could clearly see the entrance to Celeste's company. At 1 o'clock in the afternoon, they came out of the building together, walking toward the parking lot. They didn't drive to a restaurant, but got into the man's car, a black BMW. Kieran followed them and watched them drive to a boutique hotel in the city center. They entered the hotel lobby and disappeared into the elevator. Kieran waited in the lobby for 10 minutes, then walked to the service desk. Excuse me, he said to the clerk. I want to confirm whether my friend has arrived. He should have booked a room under the name Tristan Mitchell. The clerk checked the computer. Yes, Mr. Mitchell has already checked in, room number 412. Kieran thanked the clerk and left the hotel. He now knew the man's full name, Tristan Mitchell. Over the next few days, Kieran began a comprehensive background investigation. Through LinkedIn and other social media, he learned that Tristan Mitchell, 32 years old, graduated from Columbia Business School, had worked at several well-known companies. He was single, had no children, and was described by colleagues as charismatic and ambitious. Kieran also discovered more hotel records. With the help of a private detective friend, he obtained detailed information from the past 3 months. Celeste and Tristan met at different hotels almost every week, sometimes at noon, sometimes in the evening. The expenses were all paid by Tristan, but based on the consumption patterns, this was obviously premeditated regular dating. A week later, Kieran had collected sufficient evidence. Photos, hotel records, credit card consumption records, even some audio recordings. The private detective he hired was highly skilled, obtaining multiple recordings of them in hotel lobbies and restaurants, the content clearly showing the nature of their relationship. But Kieran knew that having evidence alone wasn't enough. He needed to let them know that betrayal had a price. He needed to ensure this price was heavy enough for them to remember this lesson. Kieran began formulating his revenge plan. This wasn't just about exposing their relationship, but about making them bear real consequences. He wanted to ensure Celeste lost everything she cherished, her comfortable life, her social status, her sense of security. As for Tristan, Kieran had other plans. First, Kieran needed more information about Tristan. Through further investigation, he discovered Tristan had a fiancée in Boston, a lawyer named Alexandra. They had been engaged for 2 years and were originally planning to marry next spring. Tristan obviously hadn't told Alexandra about his work transfer. She still thought he was working in New York. This was a perfect leverage point. Kieran also discovered Tristan had a not-so-clean history at the company. Through some internal contacts, he learned that Tristan had once been warned by his former company for inappropriate relationships with married colleagues. Obviously, this was his behavioral pattern, not a one-time mistake. Now Kieran had all the information and evidence he needed. It was time to begin taking action. One Tuesday morning, Kieran decided to take the first step. He sent an anonymous email to Tristan's fiancée Alexandra, attaching some photos of Celeste and Tristan together. The email was simple. I thought you should know what your fiancé is doing. These photos were taken last week. I'm sorry to be the bearer of this bad news, but I believe you have the right to know the truth. That same afternoon, Kieran received an urgent call from Celeste. Kieran, I need to come home early. Her voice sounded very tense. Tristan has some personal problems. He looks very upset. What kind of personal problems? Kieran asked, struggling to suppress his inner satisfaction. I'm not entirely sure. probably family matters. His fiancée seems to have discovered something she shouldn't have. Sounds serious, Kieran said. I hope he can handle it well. But this was just the beginning. The next day, Kieran executed the second part of his plan. He compiled all the evidence about Tristan and Celeste's relationship, including hotel records, restaurant photos, and photos of them being overly intimate in the company building, then sent them anonymously to their company's human resources department. The email subject was evidence of inappropriate relationship between employees Tristan Mitchell and Celeste Williams. The email content was detailed and professional. Dear Human Resources Department, I feel it necessary to report inappropriate conduct between two employees to your company. Tristan Mitchell and Celeste Williams have been maintaining an inappropriate relationship over the past few months, which violates the company's professional conduct policy. The attachments contain conclusive evidence, including photos of them leaving the office during work hours to go to hotels, and records of overly intimate behavior within the company. I understand the sensitivity of this situation, but I believe the company should be aware of this violation of professional conduct. Additionally, I understand that Mr. Tristan Mitchell has a similar history, having received warnings for similar issues at his previous company. I hope the company will handle this situation appropriately. Kieran knew this email would cause serious consequences. Large companies usually handle inappropriate relationships between employees, especially involving married employees, very severely. Sure enough, when Celeste came home the next day, she looked very upset. How was work today? Kieran asked, trying to make his voice sound caring. Not very good, Celeste replied. There have been some rumors and gossip at the company. Someone reported Tristan and me to Human Resources. Reported what? Kieran pretended not to know. Said our relationship was too close, violating company policy. Celeste's voice was small. It's ridiculous. We're just work partners. That is indeed ridiculous, Kieran agreed. I hope the company can clarify this misunderstanding quickly. But Kieran knew this wouldn't be a simple clarification. The company's investigation had already begun, and the evidence he provided was conclusive. On the third day, things developed as Kieran expected. Celeste received a call from Human Resources, asking her and Tristan to participate in separate formal investigation meetings. Do they have any evidence? Kieran asked, observing Celeste's reaction. I don't know, Celeste said, but her eyes were evasive. Probably some photos taken out of context. You know, sometimes normal communication between colleagues can be misunderstood. Yes, Kieran nodded. Some people always like to create rumors. But on the fourth night, when Celeste came home, she looked like she'd been struck by lightning. What happened? Kieran asked, though he already knew the answer in his heart. Tristan was asked to resign. Celeste's voice was almost a whisper. The company said they had conclusive evidence that we violated professional conduct policy. I also received a formal warning. If there are similar situations again, I'll be fired too. That's so unfair, Kieran said. If you really only had a working relationship. Celeste looked at him, her eyes full of suspicion and fear. Kieran, you didn't do anything, did you? What would I do? Kieran asked back. I don't even know Tristan's last name, let alone contact the company. But Celeste obviously didn't believe it. Her intuition told her something was wrong. On the fifth day, Kieran executed the final part of his plan. It was time to let Celeste know the truth, time to let her understand what consequences her choices had brought. That evening, Kieran prepared a special dinner. Not pasta, but Celeste's favorite pan-seared salmon with lemon cream sauce. He also opened a bottle of expensive red wine, lit candles, and arranged everything like a romantic date night. When Celeste saw all this, a flash of confusion and fear crossed her face. Is this some special occasion? She asked, her voice somewhat tense. Just wanted to have a romantic dinner with my beautiful wife, Kieran replied, pouring her a glass of red wine. It's been a long time since we had such moments. Celeste sat down cautiously, obviously sensing something unusual in the atmosphere. I think we need to talk, Kieran said, raising his wine glass. Till honesty. Honesty, Celeste repeated, her hands trembling. Yes, Kieran nodded. Like about the real relationship between you and Tristan. Celeste's face instantly turned pale. Kieran, I don't know what you're talking about. Don't know? Kieran took out his phone from his pocket and opened a photo folder. Maybe these can help you remember. He placed the phone in the center of the table, the screen displaying photos of Celeste and Tristan dining intimately at a restaurant. When Celeste saw the photos, the wine glass slipped from her hand, the liquid splashing on the white tablecloth, forming blood-red stains. "This isn't what you think," she stammered. "Then what is it?" Kieran swiped the screen, showing more photos. Photos of them embracing, kissing, entering a hotel together. "Explain these photos, Celeste." Celeste began crying, but Kieran didn't stop. He continued swiping through the photos, each one conclusive evidence. "And these," he said, showing hotel receipts and credit card records. "For months, Celeste. For months of lies, for months of betrayal." "Kieran, please listen to my explanation," Celeste cried. "Explain what?" "Explain how you sat at this table, looked into my eyes, and made up lies about working late and client meetings? Explain how you made me believe our marriage still had meaning while you were in hotel rooms with another man." Celeste couldn't answer, just continued crying. "I have more to show you," Kieran said, taking out a file folder. "This is a complete report from the private detective I hired. Every date, every hotel, every lie, all recorded here." He pushed the folder toward Celeste. "Read it. See how thorough your betrayal was." Celeste opened the folder with trembling hands, and when she saw the detailed records inside, she completely broke down. "You spied on me?" she asked through tears. "I investigated the truth," Kieran corrected, "because you left me no choice. Every lie, every excuse, forced me to search for the facts." "We can work this out," Celeste said desperately. "We can see a marriage counselor. I can change. I can." "No," Kieran interrupted her. "There is no we anymore, Celeste. You made your choice. Now you must bear the consequences." Just then, Celeste's phone rang. She looked at the screen, her face becoming even paler. "It's Tristan," she said quietly. "Answer it," Kieran said. "Let me hear what your lover wants to say." Celeste answered the call with trembling hands. "Celeste," Tristan's voice sounded angry. "Did you tell your husband? Did he contact Alexandra?" "I don't know," Celeste cried. "What do you mean you don't know? Alexandra broke up with me. She has photos of us together. And the company also received an anonymous report. I was fired. This can't all be a coincidence." Kieran took the phone. "Hello, Tristan." "You bastard." Tristan's voice was full of anger. "You ruined my life." "No," Kieran replied calmly. "You ruined your own life. I just ensured the consequences were realized. You can't do this." "I already have," Kieran said. "And this is just the beginning. Tomorrow morning, I'll send a detailed report to your former company, documenting your pattern of pursuing married colleagues. I'm sure this will affect your future employment prospects." "You can't." "I can, and I will," Kieran interrupted. "Unless you completely disappear from our lives. Leave the city, Tristan. Find a new job, somewhere I'll never see you." "This is blackmail." "This is justice," Kieran said. "You have 24 hours to consider. If I find you're still in this city tomorrow night, then your career will truly be over." Kieran hung up the phone and looked at the completely broken Celeste. "Now," he said, "let's talk about our marriage." The candles in the dining room were still burning, but the atmosphere had changed from romantic to as serious as a courtroom. Celeste slumped in her chair, her tears dried up, leaving only empty despair. Kieran sat across from her, holding his wine glass but not taking another sip, his gaze as cold as ice. "For months," Kieran repeated. "For 4 months, you lay next to me every night, pretending our marriage still existed. Do you know what disgusts me the most?" Celeste shook her head, not daring to speak. "It's not what you did with him in bed, though that does make me sick," Kieran continued. "It's that you could come home and still talk to me as if nothing happened, still act in front of me, pretending to love me." "I do love you," Celeste said quietly. "I never stopped loving you." "Love me?" Kieran laughed coldly. "You have a special way of showing love. Tell me, Celeste, when you were with him in hotels, did you think of me? When you were making up those work meeting lies, did you consider my feelings?" Celeste couldn't answer, just trembled. "I'll tell you the answer," Kieran said. "No, you didn't think of me, because if you had, you wouldn't have done those things. Things aren't as complicated as you think." Celeste tried to defend herself. "It just happened. We didn't plan it, didn't premeditate." "Didn't premeditate?" Kieran took out a paper from the file folder. "This is your credit card record. 2 months ago, you spent $400 at a high-end lingerie store. A week later, you and he spent an afternoon at the Riverside Hotel. This looks very premeditated." Celeste's face became even paler. And this, Kieran continued, taking out another receipt. An expensive perfume store, purchased the second week after your relationship began. You changed everything for him, including your scent. Kieran, please stop, Celeste cried. Why stop? Kieran asked. I'm just stating facts. You spent my money to please your lover. You used my trust to cover your betrayal. These are all facts. Kieran stood up and walked to the window, his back to Celeste. Do you know what's most ironic? Just 3 months ago, I was still considering our future. I thought maybe it was time to have a child. Maybe we could move to a bigger house. I even started looking at real estate ads. He turned to face her. And at the same time, you were planning your next date with Tristan. I'm sorry, Celeste cried. I know I hurt you, but we can start over. I'll do anything to save our marriage. Anything. Kieran returned to the table and sat down. Well, let me tell you what's going to happen next. Tomorrow morning, I'll contact a lawyer and begin divorce proceedings. No. Celeste stood up, trying to grab his hand. We can work this out. Kieran gently but firmly pulled his hand away. There's nothing to work out, Celeste. You made your choice, now I'm making mine. Please give me a chance, Celeste knelt before him. I'll prove I'm worth your forgiveness. Forgiveness. Kieran looked at her. You want forgiveness? Fine, let me ask you a few questions. When Tristan's hand first touched you, did you think of me? Celeste didn't dare answer. When you first kissed him, did you think of our marriage vows? Still silence. When you first went to bed with him, did you think about how you were betraying a man who loved you? Celeste began sobbing. You see, Kieran said, at every critical moment, every moment you could have chosen loyalty, you chose betrayal. Not once, not by accident, but a series of deliberate choices. But I regret it now, Celeste said. I realize my mistake now. You regret getting caught, Kieran corrected. If I hadn't discovered it, you would have continued. In fact, let me show you something. He took out his phone and played a recording. It was a conversation between Celeste and Tristan at a restaurant, the audio quality very clear. Tristan's voice. We need to be more careful. I think your husband is starting to suspect. Celeste's voice. Don't worry, Kieran doesn't know anything. He trusts me too much, he's too naive. As long as we're careful, he'll never find out. Tristan, are you sure? Celeste, absolutely sure. Honestly, sometimes I think he's a bit pathetic. He tries so hard to be a good husband, but he has no idea how to excite a woman. You know what I mean. The recording ended, and the room fell into deadly silence. Celeste looked like she'd been struck by lightning. Where did you record this? That doesn't matter, Kieran said. What matters is the content. You not only betrayed me, but mocked me, treated me as a joke. I didn't mean it that way, Celeste said desperately. I was just saying things in anger. In anger? Kieran repeated. You think I'm pathetic, naive, that I don't know how to excite women. Were those angry words? Celeste couldn't answer because she knew those words were sincere. This is why there's no such thing as forgiveness, Kieran said. Because this isn't just about what you did, but about who you are. You're someone who can betray someone who loves you, then mock him. Kieran stood up and walked toward the stairs. I'm going to pack some things. When I come back, I hope you're no longer here. Where should I go? Celeste asked, her voice full of panic. That's not my problem, Kieran said. Maybe you can ask Tristan if he's still willing to talk to you. Tristan has already been fired. His fiancée broke up with him too. He hates me, blames everything on me. That's unfortunate, Kieran said, but his tone had no sympathy. Maybe you should have considered that possibility earlier. I have nowhere to go, Celeste cried. All my friends are our mutual friends. I can't tell them the truth. Why can't you? Kieran asked. Because you're ashamed? Because you know how they'll look at you? Please, Kieran. Celeste crawled to his feet. Give me a week. Let me find a place to live. Kieran looked at her, this once proud, beautiful, confident woman, now kneeling on the ground begging for his mercy. He felt a complex emotion, part satisfaction, part sadness. 3 days, he said. I'll give you 3 days to move out. During these 3 days, you sleep in the guest room, and there's no conversation between us except regarding practical arrangements for the separation. Thank you, Celeste cried. Don't thank me, Kieran said. This isn't mercy, it's practicality. I need time to arrange legal matters. The next morning, Kieran contacted his lawyer Marcus Sterling, an experienced attorney specializing in complex divorce cases. I need the fastest, most thorough divorce, Kieran said in Sterling's office. I have complete evidence of infidelity. Sterling looked at the evidence files Kieran provided, impressed. This evidence is very comprehensive. Photos, recordings, hotel records, credit card consumption. Your wife's lawyer will have a hard time fighting for anything for her. Good, Kieran said. There's one more thing. I want a restraining order, prohibiting her from contacting me except through lawyers. On what grounds? Sterling asked. Harassment and emotional abuse, Kieran replied. I have recordings proving she mocked me while betraying me. I don't want her to have any opportunity to continue this psychological abuse. Sterling nodded. I can apply for a temporary restraining order. Do you have any other demands? I want the house, Kieran said. This is my premarital property. Her name was never on the deed. I also want my retirement fund and investment accounts. These are all my personal property. Does she have any assets? Her car, some personal belongings, and about $20,000 in personal savings. That's it. She might request alimony. Based on what? Kieran asked. She has a full-time job, and she chose to betray the marriage. Moreover, according to our prenuptial agreement, infidelity results in loss of alimony rights. Sterling smiled. Looks like you were prepared early on. I'm an engineer, Kieran said. I always prepare for various possibilities. When Kieran returned home, he found Celeste arguing loudly with someone on the phone in the living room. I don't care what problems you have now, Tristan, she was shouting into the phone. This is all your fault. If you hadn't pursued me, none of this would have happened. Is that so? Tristan's voice on the other end was angry, and even from several meters away, Kieran could hear it. Did I force you to lie? Did I force you to betray your husband? You made me believe we had a future. Celeste cried. You said you would leave Alexandra for me. I never said I would leave Alexandra. That was your own imagination. You're lying. I'm lying? That's ironic. You lied to your husband for 4 months, and now you're accusing me of lying. Kieran quietly listened to this conversation, feeling a cold satisfaction. Their relationship was self-destructing, just as he had expected. Listen, Celeste, Tristan continued. It's over. My life has been ruined. I won't let it get worse. Don't contact me anymore. We have no future. Tristan, please. The phone hung up. Celeste angrily threw her phone toward the sofa, then noticed Kieran standing in the doorway. How long have you been listening? She asked, her eyes full of anger and shame. Long enough, Kieran replied. Looks like your lover isn't as loyal as you imagined. Don't do this to me, Celeste said. I've already lost everything. You didn't lose everything, Kieran corrected. You threw everything away. There's a difference. I said I was sorry. Yes, you did say that. But sorry can't change anything. Sorry can't erase your betrayal, can't repair your lies, can't restore the trust you destroyed. Celeste walked toward him, trying to grab his hand. Kieran, please give me another chance. I'll prove I can change. Kieran stepped back, avoiding her touch. Change? How do you want to change? Can you change the fact that you're a liar? Can you change the fact that you betrayed me? People make mistakes. This wasn't a mistake. Kieran's voice became angry for the first time. A mistake is unintentional. It's negligence. It's an error in judgment. What you did was betrayal, deception, deliberate cruelty. Celeste stepped back several paces, frightened by his anger. For months, Celeste, Kieran continued. 4 months of lies. Do you know what that means? It means that for the past 4 months, every conversation between us, every intimate contact, every I love you, was based on lies. But I really do love you. No, you don't love me. You love security, comfortable living, having someone to pay the bills and maintain the house. But you don't love me as a person, because if you loved me, you wouldn't have betrayed me. On the 3rd morning, Kieran woke up to find Celeste had already begun packing her things. Her eyes were red and swollen. Obviously, she hadn't slept all night. I found a place, she said, not daring to meet his eyes. It's a small apartment. I'll move there this afternoon. Good, Kieran said. I'll stay at the office until evening. When I come back, I expect all your things to be gone. Kieran, Celeste tried to say something, but Kieran raised his hand to stop her. Everything we need to say should be said through lawyers, he said. From now on, any communication between us must go through legal representatives. This is too cold, Celeste said. Yes, Kieran agreed. But necessary. When Kieran returned home that evening, the house felt empty and quiet. All of Celeste's things were gone. Her clothes, her cosmetics, her books, even her plants. The only thing left was a note on the kitchen counter. Kieran picked up the note and read it. Kieran, I know I have no right to ask for your forgiveness, but I hope someday you can understand that I never meant to hurt you. Everything I did was wrong, and I deeply regret it. I know you hate me now, and I understand. But please remember, we once had beautiful times. We once truly loved each other. I hope someday you can find true happiness. Celeste. After reading the note, Kieran tore it into pieces and threw it in the trash. Words were cheap, actions had meaning. Over the next few weeks, the divorce proceedings moved quickly. Celeste hired a lawyer, but as Sterling had predicted, she had little to fight for. The evidence was too conclusive, the law too clear. Celeste's lawyer tried to argue for alimony, but the prenuptial agreement was clear. Infidelity resulted in loss of alimony rights. She tried to claim partial ownership of the house, but the deed clearly showed it was Kieran's premarital property. In the end, Celeste got her car, her personal belongings, and a very small cash settlement. But Kieran's revenge wasn't over yet. A month later, he executed the next phase of his plan. He contacted all their mutual friends, not to spread malicious rumors, but simply to tell them the truth. He sent an email to their friends. Dear friends, I want you to know that Celeste and I are getting divorced. I know this might surprise you, so I think you have the right to know the truth. For the past 4 months, Celeste has been having an inappropriate relationship with her colleague. I discovered this relationship and have conclusive evidence. I have decided to end our marriage. I don't ask you to take sides, but I hope you understand why I made this decision. Betrayal and deception are not things I'm willing to tolerate. I hope we can continue to be friends. Kieran. The reaction was swift and unanimous. Almost all their friends expressed support for Kieran and shock and disappointment at Celeste's behavior. Celeste tried to defend herself, but the damage was done. Her social circle completely collapsed. She found herself isolated, with no one willing to listen to her explanations or excuses. Meanwhile, Tristan's career also suffered a serious blow. Kieran ensured his reputation in the industry was tarnished through some careful conversations and information sharing, letting people know that Tristan was an untrustworthy employee who would have inappropriate relationships with married colleagues. 3 months later, Kieran heard that Tristan had moved to another state, accepting a job with a significantly reduced salary. His career prospects were permanently damaged. As for Celeste, her life had also undergone huge changes. She was forced to move to the other side of the city, living in a small and shabby apartment. Her work performance declined due to personal issues, and eventually she was transferred to a lower position with reduced pay. She tried to start dating again, but her reputation had spread. In their social circle, everyone knew she was a woman who had betrayed her husband. 6 months later, Kieran sat in his renovated living room, reading the local newspaper. Celeste had completely disappeared from his life, except for the occasional legal documents that needed to be processed. He heard she had eventually left the city, moving to another state. Apparently, she could no longer rebuild her life here. Kieran felt a deep satisfaction. This wasn't about revenge or hatred, but about justice. Celeste had made her choices. Now she bore the consequences. So had Tristan. They thought they could betray and deceive without bearing consequences, but they were wrong. Kieran ensured their actions had corresponding costs. A year later, Kieran began dating again. He was more cautious now, more vigilant, but also wiser. He learned to identify red flags, learned to protect himself. He never saw Celeste again, nor wanted to see her. She was part of his past life, a chapter he had completely closed. Sometimes, on particularly quiet nights, he would think of that Wednesday dinner. Think of Celeste's expression when she saw Tristan's message. Think of the moment she choked on the pasta. That was the moment everything changed, the moment truth began to reveal itself. But more often, he thought about the future. He had a clean home, an honest life, and the determination to never again tolerate betrayal. Celeste had learned an expensive lesson. Actions have consequences, betrayal has a price. And Kieran had learned a valuable lesson. Sometimes, the best revenge is letting people bear the natural consequences of their choices. 2 years later, on a spring evening, Kieran sat in his backyard, enjoying a glass of red wine and a good book. His life was simple and fulfilling, without lies, without betrayal, without drama. His phone rang. the caller ID showing a number he didn't recognize. He hesitated for a moment, then answered. Kieran, a familiar but tired voice came through the phone. It's me, Celeste. Kieran was silent for a few seconds, then said calmly, What do you want? I just wanted to say I'm sorry. Her voice was small, sounding distant. I want you to know that I regret everything I did every day. Okay, Kieran said. Is there anything else? I wanted to ask you, she continued, her voice trembling. Is there any possibility we could? No. Kieran interrupted her. Whatever you want to ask, the answer is no. But, Celeste, Kieran's voice was firm and final. You made your choices. I made mine. We have nothing to discuss. I've changed, Kieran. I'm not the same person I was before. Maybe you have changed, Kieran said. But it doesn't matter. The damage has been done and can't be undone. Everyone deserves a second chance, Celeste cried. Everyone has the right to choose, Kieran responded. You chose betrayal. I chose to move on. I've lost everything, she said quietly. Those are the consequences of your choices, Kieran said. Goodbye, Celeste. Don't contact me again. Kieran hung up the phone, then turned it off. He returned to his wine and book, enjoying the warm spring breeze and the songs of birds. Let the past be the past. He had a whole new life to live, one built on honesty, respect, and self-worth. This was the true price of betrayal, not just losing the person you betrayed, but losing any possibility of ever regaining that person's respect and trust. Celeste understood this now, but it was too late. Kieran closed his book and stood up, walking into the house. Tomorrow was a new day, full of new possibilities. And this time, he would make sure those possibilities belonged only to those who deserved trust. That's the end of today's story. For more captivating tales, hit subscribe and never miss an episode.